My name is Odette Kincaid, and I turned 70 last spring. Most people my age slow down. I seem to keep drawing up plans. Old habits die harder than youth. Every morning, I still rise at 6, brew black coffee, and open 3 screens on my laptop before the lake outside my window has shaken off its mist. From this modest condo overlooking Lake Mendota, I coordinate budgets and logistics for 3 regional companies. They call me a fractional COO, a fancy title that means I solve problems other people can't afford to get wrong. For that, they pay me almost $40,000 a month. No one would guess it. My neighbors see an older woman in thrift store sweaters, carrying the same worn leather briefcase she bought in 1989. Even the grocery clerks call me ma'am, with the gentle patience reserved for retirees who count coupons. I never correct them, or correct. My daughter, Sariah, thinks I still do some office paperwork. It's easier that way. She grew up believing money was noisy, something to flash or hide from, never something to understand. I taught her values, not numbers. Or at least I thought I did. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped inside a pale pink envelope smelling faintly of perfume. "Mom, you'll finally meet the Voss family," she'd written. Beneath it, a neat line. "Formal dinner before the wedding. Please dress appropriately." I read it twice, then set it beside my ledger. I've signed million-dollar contracts with less ceremony. The words "dress appropriately" lingered longer than they should have. Pride has a particular tone when laced with apology. Outside, a thin sheet of ice floated over the lake, catching the winter light. I thought about Sariah's voice on the phone earlier, bright, brittle, too eager for my approval. Somewhere between excitement and caution, for years, my silence had been a shield. It kept me out of arguments, out of judgment, and most of all, out of the small competitions that exhaust the soul. But that evening, as I closed my laptop and smoothed the creases of that pink envelope, I felt the first crack in that old habit. Silence had protected me long enough. Perhaps, this time, it could serve another purpose entirely. The next evening, while sorting through receipts at my kitchen table, I heard Sariah's voice drift from the hallway. She'd stepped outside to take a call, unaware that the thin door between us might as well have been paper. Mom's sweet, but simple. She laughed softly. "Don't expect luxury. She's harmless." Really, the words landed quietly, without venom, but they spread through me like a small, slow fire. I set my pen down and listened to her footsteps fade toward the elevator. Sweet but simple. I poured myself another half cup of coffee and waited for the sting to settle into something steadier. Anger was too easy. Strategy was better. If that was the role they expected of me, I would play it so well that even the chandeliers at their wedding would bow in approval. The next morning, I opened my closet and ran a hand across the neatly arranged fabrics, structured blazers, silk scarves, shoes that had seen boardrooms and airports. Then I reached for a faded blue dress, soft at the seams, its color dulled from years of sun and detergent. My shoes, low-heeled and worn at the edges, followed. No earrings, no watch. I pinned my hair back with a plain clip and looked into the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't pitiful. It was precise. From the drawer beneath my desk, I pulled out an old canvas tote, its handles slightly frayed. Inside, I placed a small silver handkerchief embroidered with my mother's initials, a relic of her own quiet dignity. It felt like armor. Before leaving, I powered up my laptop and reviewed a confidential report for one of my clients, a logistics firm finalizing a multi-million-dollar merger. I made 2 corrections, sent it off to the CEO with a short note, and shut the screen. The cursor blinked once before fading to black. Then I slipped the tote over my shoulder, locked the apartment door behind me, and stepped into the hallway. The faint hum of the elevator echoed like a prelude. By the time the doors opened, I had become exactly who they expected to meet. The restaurant shimmered against the lake like a chandelier turned sideways. Warm light spilled across glass panels, catching reflections of evening boats and champagne laughter. I hesitated at the entrance, straightened the strap of my canvas tote, and gave my name to the host. "Ah, the Kincaid reservation," he said, scanning a list. "They're expecting you." Inside, the air smelled of truffle butter and polish. Every table was dressed in white linen. Every chair angled just so. It was the kind of place where menus came without prices, because asking was considered vulgar. I spotted Sariah first, her back straight, hands clasped too tightly in her lap. Beside her sat her husband, Eamon, tall, kind-faced, but with the restless energy of a man navigating both love and loyalty. His expression softened when he saw me. "Odette, you made it," he said, standing to pull out a chair. And then came Petra and Garrick Voss. Petra rose halfway, her emerald dress catching the light. "Mrs. Kincaid," she greeted smoothly, offering a hand more for formality than warmth. Garrick nodded, his smile courteous but clipped. They both looked immaculate, their composure honed by generations of rehearsal. The waiter guided me to a chair at the far end of the table. Sariah began to protest. She should sit, but Petra's hand landed lightly on her arm. "This way is perfect," she said. "The lighting here is softer." I folded my hands in my lap and smiled. "Lovely," I murmured. Menus were handed out like invitations to a secret society. The waiter paused at my shoulder. "Would you prefer red or white, ma'am?" Before I could answer, Petra leaned in with a gracious tilt of her head. "Maybe something simple," she suggested. "Something easy on the palate." The waiter nodded, unsure whom to obey. I chose still water. It was safer that way. As conversation began, Paris apartments, lake properties. The market these days I sat quietly, tracing the rim of my glass. Every word, every glance, every polite cruelty slipped neatly into its place like lines on a spreadsheet. I was taking notes, just not the kind anyone could see. Dinner arrived in perfect choreography, plates descending in unison, silverware glinting under soft light. The waiter poured wine for the table, stopping politely at my glass. I shook my head. "Water's fine," I said, and he nodded, uncertain whether to pity or admire me. Petra lifted her glass, smiling with the composure of a woman accustomed to admiration. "To family," she announced, "and to the joy of seeing all our efforts come together." Her eyes lingered on Sariah, then on the floral arrangements that towered like proof of generosity. "We were happy to help," she continued. "You know how weddings are. Young couples always need a little guidance." "Garrick handled the house down payment, didn't you?" "Dear," Garrick chuckled. "A modest nudge in the right direction. It's important they start on solid ground." Sariah nodded with that polite, grateful smile I'd taught her as a child, the kind that hides discomfort behind perfection. I dabbed the corner of my mouth with the napkin. "That's very generous," I said quietly. "I just send my daughter small gifts, sometimes a book, a scarf." Petra tilted her head. "The way one might study an antique they didn't intend to buy. That's lovely." Thoughtful gifts matter just as much as big ones. The words were smooth, but the sweetness caught on the edges. Conversation drifted to the menu, the imported linens, the guest list. Each topic tagged invisibly with cost. When the main course arrived, Petra complimented the chef, adding, "We had to prepay to secure the reservation, but quality always comes at a price." A soft laugh circled the table. Garrick nodded approvingly, as though generosity were a sport he excelled at. Then came the line delivered with a tilt of her chin so casual it almost passed unnoticed. You must be proud she married so well. Odette. My fingers tightened around the napkin. The fabric wrinkled against my palm, but I smiled anyway. I'm proud she's happy, I said, keeping my voice light. Across the table. Sariah's fork paused midair. Her eyes met mine for a second, then slipped away. When dessert was cleared and the laughter began to thin, Petra leaned toward me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mrs. Kincaid, she said lightly, why don't we step over there for a moment, just us ladies? She gestured toward a small lounge corner near the window, velvet chairs. Low golden light, and the hum of a piano bleeding in from the main room. Garrick gave her a knowing nod. As if to approve of whatever quiet negotiation was about to happen, I followed. Curious, more than cautious, Petra crossed her legs neatly, the motion elegant, deliberate, from her clutch. She withdrew a cream-colored envelope, thick and crisply sealed. Across the front, embossed in tasteful gold, were the words, Living Support Arrangement. I hope you don't take this the wrong way, she began. Tone syrup smooth. Eamon and Sariah are young, newly married. We'd like to help everyone adjust comfortably. We thought, perhaps, a small monthly allowance might make things easier for you, $600 or so. Nothing extravagant, just a gesture. I blinked once. A gesture, I repeated softly. Yes, she continued. In return, we'd appreciate giving them a bit of space. Young couples need privacy, don't they? Too many visits can unsettle things. I held her gaze. That's thoughtful of you. Petra exhaled, visibly relieved, mistaking calm for consent. Wonderful. Take your time to think about it. I reached for the envelope. My hand steady. I will. I said. Her smile returned, polished and hollow. I knew you'd understand. Back at the table, Sariah was laughing at something Eamon said, but her eyes flickered toward me, searching, uncertain. I smiled back, the same measured smile I'd perfected in boardrooms and family dinners alike. Later, in the restroom, I locked the stall and opened the envelope. Inside was a typed document: terms, conditions, payment schedules. It read like a contract between strangers. I read every line carefully, then folded it once, sharply, until the paper made a clean, controlled crease. When I slipped it back into my bag, my reflection in the mirror was still, composed, but my mind had already shifted. Now I knew exactly what kind of people I was dealing with. Morning sunlight poured through the curtains of my hotel room, cutting thin gold lines across the carpet. I had barely slept. The envelope Petra had given me lay unopened on the nightstand, its presence heavier than paper should ever be. At 8, my phone buzzed. A polite voice introduced herself as the manager of Bloom & Branch, the floral company for the wedding. Mrs. Kincaid. I'm terribly sorry to bother you, she said, hesitant. The final invoice, $2,400, hasn't been paid. We were told to speak with the bride's family, but Mrs. Voss asked us to wait until next week. I just didn't want to cause any embarrassment today. Embarrassment. The word hung in the air like perfume gone sour. I took down her information. Send me the invoice, I said. 10 minutes later, I transferred the payment and received the confirmation. No fanfare, no signature flourish. Just numbers balanced. Quietly. By noon, the family brunch was already underway on the terrace overlooking Lake Mendota. The scene gleamed with polite exhaustion, glasses clinking, polite chatter, the faint smell of espresso and perfume. Petra, immaculate as ever, sighed as she stirred her coffee. Honestly, I don't know what's happened to service standards. The florist still hasn't finalized the payment. I'll have to call them myself. I reached into my tote and unfolded the receipt. The paper made a soft, deliberate sound as I set it beside her saucer. Already handled, I said. Conversation stalled. Forks froze midair. Garrick blinked. Sariah's breath caught. I met Petra's eyes, steady. Calm, not angry, just finished. I don't accept stipends, I said. Her lips parted slightly. As if the room's air had changed temperature, I covered the florist to keep this day about love, not debt. Eamon looked from me to Sariah, realizing more than he'd ever been told. Money, I added quietly, is for freedom, not leverage. I pushed back my chair. The sound was clean and final. Like punctuation. Thank you for dinner last night. Everything was beautiful. And then I walked toward the exit, past the tables, past the glances, past the gilded quiet that had mistaken me for small. The reception lights had long gone out, but the lake still shimmered, rippling with the echoes of music that had faded hours ago. I stood near the water's edge, shoes in one hand, the night air cool against my skin. The laughter from the terrace was gone, only the sound of crickets and the distant hum of a generator remained. Behind me, footsteps crunched lightly on the gravel. I didn't turn. Mom Sariah's voice was soft, brittle at the edges. When I looked back, she was hugging her arms, her makeup slightly smudged, her eyes shining not from celebration, but from exhaustion. I was looking for you, she said. Everyone thought you'd left. I needed air, I replied. Too much perfume and polite conversation. She gave a small, trembling laugh, then sat down beside me on the wooden railing. For a long time, she said nothing. The moon laid a silver path across the lake, and I waited for her words to find their way through it. I was ashamed. She finally whispered, not of you, but of how small I still feel around people like them. Her voice cracked. I thought if I could make you seem simple, harmless, maybe they'd accept me. But I just made both of us look like strangers. I didn't scold her. I'd done enough hiding in my life to know the shape of fear. I suppose my little test wasn't much kinder. I said, pretending to be someone else just to expose who they were. She glanced at me, startled. You knew what they'd do, I suspected, I said quietly, but I wanted the truth. Sometimes truth costs a bit of peace. We sat in silence, the kind that no longer needed to hurt. We both wore costumes. I added, theirs sparkled, ours blended. Both were armor. Sariah leaned her head against my shoulder. No more costumes. No more, I promised. Across the lake, the wind caught the last of the floating lanterns, pulling it higher until it disappeared into the night. The morning light over Lake Mendota was bright and unforgiving. The dining room of the lakeside inn smelled faintly of citrus and strong coffee. Silverware clinked against porcelain in a rhythm too polite to be natural. Petra sat across from me, her emerald earrings catching the sunlight like small warnings. Garrick had his phone on the table, pretending to check emails, though his finger hadn't moved the screen in minutes. Sariah and Eamon sat between us, forming an invisible buffer of tension and inheritance. About last night, Garrick began, his voice carrying the deliberate calm of a man who disliked confrontations but hated losing face even more. Perhaps there were miscommunications. We all wanted the same thing, peace for the children. Petra nodded, her tone smooth as cream. It was simply generosity. Mrs. Kincaid, a kind gesture. Misunderstood. I stirred my coffee once, slowly, until the spoon stopped moving on its own. Generosity doesn't require signatures or envelopes, I said. It requires respect. Her smile faltered. I don't accept stipends. I continued, my tone measured. No private deals, no quiet conditions. Respect is the only currency I accept. The air changed, barely perceptible, but definite. Eamon reached for Sariah's hand beneath the table. My daughter straightened her posture, steady and sure. I agree, Sariah said softly, but with weight. Eamon and I will build our life ourselves. Help is welcome. Control is not. Petra looked at her daughter as if seeing her through a new, unwelcome lens. Garrick cleared his throat. No one intended control. We just... Eamon interrupted, still calm. Then we'll all understand this clearly. We love you both, but from now on, our boundaries stay where we set them. The table fell quiet. A gull cried outside. Sharp and distant, Petra exhaled. The movement small but telling. Very well, she said. If that's what makes you comfortable. It does, I replied. For a moment. No one spoke. Then Garrick gestured for the waiter and ordered more coffee, as if caffeine could dissolve pride. It wasn't harmony. Not yet. But it was truth. And that was enough for breakfast. The week after the wedding moved like shifting weather, bright one day, gray the next, never quite still. On Monday, a message arrived from Petra. Her tone was crisp, measured, the kind that hides discomfort beneath etiquette. I regret any offense caused. Emotions ran high. I hope we can all move forward with grace. I read it twice, then typed my reply without hesitation. Respect takes practice. I'm willing to practice. No exclamation marks. No sharpness, just the truth. Folded neatly into civility. She never responded. By Tuesday, my life had settled back into its quiet rhythm. Mornings began with consulting calls and coffee by the window, where sailboats dotted Lake Mendota like white stitches across blue fabric. Evenings were simple roasted vegetables, a book, sometimes a glass of wine. The stillness didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. On Wednesday afternoon, a knock at my door broke the pattern. Sariah stood there, hair tied up, no makeup, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind that looked like they grew exactly where they were meant to. I didn't know what kind you liked, she said shyly. I like these, I replied. We brewed tea, the way we used to before life got noisy with ambition and judgment. Conversation moved softly about her work, Eamon's plans, the apartment they were decorating on their own. Then, as the kettle hissed its last breath, we both began to laugh about nothing, really, and everything. When the laughter faded, the silence stayed, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, breathable, the kind that carries peace instead of distance. Sariah leaned her head against my shoulder. You know, Mom, she said, you were right about money. I smiled, tracing the rim of my teacup. It's just another kind of weather. I said, you learn to walk through it. By spring, the air around Lake Mendota had softened. The ice had melted into ripples, and the wind carried the smell of thawed earth and possibility. That Sunday, I set the table for 4. The soup simmered gently on the stove lentils. Rosemary and a touch of lemon, the kind of meal that fills a room without announcing itself. Sariah and Eamon arrived first, arms full of bread and laughter. Their voices fit easily into the space now, like music that had learned to stay in tune. An hour later, the doorbell rang again. When I opened it, Petra and Garrick stood on the threshold, hesitant. No emeralds this time. No pressed arrogance, just polite discomfort. Thank you for inviting us, Petra said. Her voice had lost its sheen, replaced by something quieter, almost human. Come in, I replied, stepping aside. Above the doorframe, a small brass key hung from a silk ribbon. The engraving beneath it read, Family enters by respect, not assumption. Petra's eyes caught it for a second, and she nodded faintly. Garrick said nothing, but his glance lingered thoughtful, restrained. The meal unfolded without spectacle. Conversation found new rhythms, small, careful, genuine. We laughed over mismatched bowls, over how the bread was too crisp and the soup too hot. No one compared prices. No one counted gestures when the last spoon clinked softly against the table. Petra stood. "Let me help with the dishes," she said, already gathering plates. I almost told her it wasn't necessary, but stopped. The offer wasn't about plates. It was the first step toward something she didn't yet have a name for. In the kitchen, the four of us moved in quiet rhythm, water running, plates rinsed. The smell of soap and steam filling the small space. Later, when they'd gone, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The lake outside shimmered gold, catching the light like a promise. Wealth isn't what fills your home, I thought. It's what stays when the noise leaves. I let the silence settle, soft and full, and for once, didn't need to say a word.